vivid nightmares. Emily's eyes shot open, her heart pounding. Another nightmare. She slowly sat up in bed, rubbing her temples as vague images flashed through her mind. Strange insect-like creatures with large dark eyes hovering over her, their spindly fingers probing her body. Emily shuddered, pulling back the sleeve of her pajama top. Were those two small red marks on her forearm new? She couldn't remember. Swinging her legs off the bed, Emily stood up on shaky legs. She walked to the window and peered out at the night sky. A full moon glowed eerily between patches of clouds. Some nights Emily swore she could see strange lights dancing amongst the stars. She wondered if she was losing her mind. Emily had been having these vivid nightmares for weeks now. They always involved the same shadowy creatures. She never got a clear look at them, only glimpses of bulbous heads, jagged mouths and eyes that penetrated her very soul. She would wake up paralyzed with terror, her body tingling as if she had been electrically shocked. Emily was ashamed to admit the dreams seemed more like suppressed memories trying to surface, but that was absurd, wasn't it? Dr. Travers scanned Emily's brain scan results with a furrowed brow. He could find no medical explanation for her symptoms. Emily sat nervously on the exam table, absently scratching at a mark on her ankle. She studied the doctor's face, searching for answers. "Physically, you seem fine," Dr. Travers finally said. "Your blood work came back normal. No tumors or anomalies on your scans." Emily sighed. She didn't know if she should feel relieved or more frightened. Dr. Travers removed his glasses, meeting her eyes. "I'd like to refer you to my colleague, Dr. Miller. She's a psychiatrist who specializes in dreams and repressed memories." Emily tensed. She didn't like the implication that this was all in her head, but she nodded politely and took the referral. That night when she got home, Emily sat on the edge of her bed staring at the paper. She lifted the phone, dialed halfway through the number, and set it back down. Picking up a silver hand mirror, she angled it to examine the back of her neck. Another mark, 2 small dots, red and inflamed. Emily's hands trembled. She knew she had to call. "Tell me more about this Dr. Miller," said Lucy. Emily took a long sip of wine before responding. She was grateful her best friend Lucy had come over tonight. Just having another person nearby made her feel less crazy. "Apparently she's one of the leading experts on repressed memories," said Emily. "She wrote some book about people who were abducted by aliens." Lucy's eyebrows shot up. "Abducted? You don't really think—" "No, of course not," Emily gave a hollow laugh. "I just want these dreams to stop." Lucy squeezed her hand reassuringly. Emily smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She studied her friend in the flickering candlelight. With her fiery red hair, porcelain skin, and aquamarine eyes, Lucy possessed a unique beauty. But there was darkness there too. Lucy struggled with addiction, a vice Emily secretly resented. Because at least Lucy's demons were tangible. You could see them, smell them, touch them, not like this nameless terror that consumed Emily's nights. "It will be okay," Lucy said. "Dr. Miller will figure this out." Emily hoped Lucy was right. She had called the psychiatrist that morning and had an appointment next Tuesday. Emily knew she wouldn't feel sane again until she got to the bottom of these nightmares. Emily fidgeted in the waiting room chair, rubbing a mark on her wrist. She glanced around at the nondescript office. Finally, a woman appeared, waving Emily back. "I'm Dr. Miller. Thank you for coming in, Emily." The psychiatrist's voice was warm and welcoming. Her salt and pepper hair framed kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Emily felt herself relax slightly. Over the next hour, Emily opened up about her experiences. The nightmares, the shadowy figures, the unexplained markings on her body. Saying it all out loud made her feel foolish, but Dr. Miller listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. She hypothesized that Emily may have undergone a traumatic experience as a child that her subconscious was trying to dredge up. She wasn't sure she wanted to dredge up whatever terrifying images lurked in the recesses of her mind, but she was desperate for answers. That night, Emily tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Visions of giant insects crawled behind her eyelids. She scratched absently at her shoulder. When she switched on the light and examined the spot, she nearly vomited. There was a fresh mark, 2 neat puncture holes surrounded by red, inflamed skin. Emily hugged herself, rocking back and forth, willing morning to come. Emily approached the white Victorian house with trepidation. It looked warm and inviting against the gloomy, overcast sky, but Emily felt only cold dread seeping into her bones. Lucy gave her arm a reassuring squeeze as they walked up the steps. "I'll be right here when you get out," her friend promised. Emily tried to summon a grateful smile. Her face felt frozen. A nurse led Emily to a small room where Dr. Miller was waiting. Emily settled into a reclining leather chair while the doctor attached electrodes to her temples. "Just relax and breathe deeply," Dr. Miller soothed. "Listen to my voice and let yourself float back." As the hypnotic state took over, Emily sank into inky blackness. Then shapes began to emerge, shadowy figures surrounding her, long, spindly fingers prodding her flesh, raspy, unintelligible sounds that might have been language. Emily thrashed against unseen restraint. The creatures leaned over her, peering with soulless obsidian eyes. She felt the sting as they made another mark. "No!" Emily finally screamed. "No more!" She was jolted awake by Dr. Miller gently shaking her shoulder. Emily's cheeks were wet with tears, her body drenched in sweat. The doctor's face was grim. "I'm referring you to a colleague, Emily. I believe he can help." The anomalies were multiplying. Emily now found a new mark on her body nearly every morning. She hid them under long sleeves and pants, not wanting to scare Lucy. Her friend had enough demons. The new psychiatrist, Dr. Graham, had hypnotized Emily several more times. The sessions always ended with her screaming and shaking, but each time the details became sharper. Insect-like beings with gray skin and oblong heads, a blinding white room, excruciating pain as they probed her flesh. Dr. Graham believed her dreams were suppressed memories from being abducted as a child. He had connected her to a support group of others who had similar experiences. Their shared stories gave Emily chills. She sat alone one night reading through posts on their online forum. Words blurred as exhaustion threatened to overtake her. Then Emily heard a noise like branches scraping her window. Her blood turned to ice. Rising on shaky legs, she peeled back the curtain. Nothing but darkness. Emily crawled into bed, images of alien creatures swirling through her mind, clawing, grasping, hurting her. She didn't want to sleep, didn't want to dream, but she had no choice. Her eyes drifted closed as she surrendered to the nightmare she could never fully awaken from. Emily stumbled through the next few days in a fog. She called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything but the terrifying dreams. Dr. Graham urged her to check herself into the psychiatric hospital for more intensive treatment and observation. Emily refused. The thought of being confined and probed against her will filled her with unspeakable dread. Instead, she became a recluse in her own home. She unplugged the phones and drew the curtains. The only outside contact she allowed was the occasional visit from Lucy. Her friend's company gave her fleeting comfort, but Lucy's concern was starting to feel suffocating. "Let me stay over tonight," Lucy pleaded one evening. "I don't think you should be alone right now." "I need space," Emily responded woodenly. Lucy reluctantly agreed to give her some time. That night, Emily tossed and turned, images of alien figures flashing behind her eyes. She clawed at her skin, drawing blood. There were so many marks now, evidence of their sadistic experiments. Emily lurched out of bed and stumbled to the bathroom. Gripping the sink, she stared at her gaunt, haunted reflection in the mirror. Something seemed to flicker in her peripheral vision. Spinning around, she searched the empty room. "Leave me alone!" she screamed into the darkness. "Get out of my head!" Emily sank to the cold tile floor, sobbing. She couldn't tell reality from nightmare anymore. She needed to escape. Emily knew what she had to do. The aliens were coming for her. She could feel their dark presence surrounding her, creeping in. They would never let her be. In the pale dawn light, Emily scrawled a note to Lucy, begging her friend not to look for her. She packed a small bag and withdrew all the cash she had in the bank. As the first rays of sun peeked over the horizon, Emily got into her car and started driving. She stuck to back roads, wanting to avoid people as much as possible. Emily drove for hours until she reached a dense forest far from any towns. She abandoned her car on a winding dirt road and set out on foot. Under the thick canopy of trees, Emily felt sheltered, hidden. But she knew they would still come for her, find her. They always did. Using tools stolen from a hardware store, Emily constructed a crude shelter deep in the woods. She disguised the entrance and rigged noise traps all around. Now all she could do was wait. Over the next few days, Emily rarely slept. She had nightmares even while awake now, memories and fantasies merging into a hellish loop she couldn't escape. One night she heard a twig snap outside her shelter. Emily's heart seized in her chest. Peering out into the darkness, she saw several shadowy figures lurking behind the trees. Their bulbous eyes glinted, reflecting the moonlight. They had found her, again. A scream tore from Emily's throat as she turned and fled deeper into the woods, but there was nowhere left to hide. Emily's breath tore from her lungs in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the dark forest. Low-hanging branches clawed at her face and arms, leaving behind bloody scratches, but she didn't feel the pain. All her mind registered was blind animal fear. Behind her, she could hear the aliens crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. Their raspy, guttural voices called out to her in a strange tongue. Emily wanted to collapse and sob, to beg them to leave her in peace, but she knew such appeals were useless. They would never let her go. Up ahead, Emily spotted a rocky outcropping. Without thinking, she scrambled up the boulders, pebbles skidding under her shoes. Reaching the top, she realized it was a cliff edge. The drop below was at least 100 feet onto a bed of jagged rocks. Emily spun around. Below her, the aliens were climbing the rocks, encircling her. Their soulless black eyes stared up at her, reflecting no emotion, only cold purpose. Insect-like pincers on their mouths clicked excitedly, echoing in the still night air. Trapped between the cliff edge and her tormentors, Emily froze. This was it. After years of running and hiding, they had finally come to claim her. She thought of simply stepping off the cliff, ending her terror once and for all. As the aliens closed in, Emily closed her eyes, waiting for the pain she knew would follow. Their claw-tipped fingers grasped at her clothes and skin. She screamed, the sound reverberating through the empty forest. Then everything went black. "She's waking up. Emily, can you hear me?" Emily's eyes fluttered open. The bright hospital room came into focus. Standing over her was Dr. Miller, the psychiatrist. Lucy stood next to the doctor, gripping Emily's hand tightly, her eyes rimmed with red. "What happened?" Emily rasped. Her throat felt raw. Dr. Miller spoke gently. "You had a psychotic break, Emily. Do you remember going to the woods, building a shelter?" Flashes crossed Emily's mind, the creatures pursuing her, the cliff edge. "I found your car while the police searched the woods," said Lucy, her voice breaking. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten for you." Emily shook her head weakly. "But the aliens, they were there hunting me." Even now, part of her believed it must have been real. Dr. Miller gave her a sympathetic look. "There were no aliens, Emily. You were alone out there. Your mind constructed an elaborate hallucination, likely stemming from your dreams and repressed traumas. But you're safe now." Emily glanced down at her arms. For the first time in months, they were free of any strange marks. Had she somehow been inflicting those all along, carving her own skin during fugue states? The thought made bile rise in her throat. She looked back and forth between Lucy and Dr. Miller, anchors to reality. Maybe with proper treatment she could get better. Leave the aliens, both real and imagined, behind. "Okay," Emily finally said, "I'm ready to come back now." Over the next few weeks in the psychiatric hospital, Emily started to feel more grounded. With the help of medication and intensive therapy, her delusions about aliens slowly faded. She began to accept that her dreams and visions had all been manifestations of a fractured psyche, nothing more. Lucy came to visit often, patiently recounting stories from Emily's past to help her distinguish fact from fantasy. The false memories constructed by her imagination grew hazy, while real moments with friends and family became clearer. Emily started opening up in group therapy sessions, relieved to share her experience among others who had suffered similar breaks with reality. She formed a close friendship with a woman named Megan, who also struggled with disturbing dreams. Their shared pain and hope for recovery bonded them. One night after lights out, Emily sat up talking softly with Megan in the darkness of their room. As her new friend described a recent nightmare, Emily felt the hairs on her neck stand up, the shadowy figures, the raspy alien voices. It was exactly like her own dreams, too similar to be coincidence. A creeping unease came over Emily. "How long have you had these nightmares?" Emily whispered. Megan tilted her head, thinking, "As long as I can remember. Why?" Emily hesitated. No reason. She lay back down, pulling the covers tight, but sleep did not come easy. Emily stared up at the ceiling, unable to escape one lingering thought. What if the aliens had found a new victim? Over the next few days, Emily wrestled with herself over what to do. Megan's story nagged at her, threatening to undo her own healing process. Could she really sit by while her friends suffered the same alien torment? Emily decided she had to know more. One afternoon during free time, she gently probed Megan for details about her nightmares and when they started. Emily carefully sketched a timeline looking for clues. She learned that Megan had grown up only a few miles from Emily's hometown, a fact that sent a chill down Emily's spine. It was too aligned to be mere chance. Her sense of unease grew. That night, Emily lay awake, listening to Megan whimper in her sleep as dark visions took hold. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, breath coming fast. She wanted to wake Megan to free her from the living nightmare as someone had once done for her. But Emily knew she was walking a dangerous line between concern and madness. If she let obsession with aliens consume her again, she could lose herself forever. Still, if there was any truth to the alien encounter, it meant others were at risk. Emily realized she faced an impossible choice: ignore the signs to protect her own sanity, or sacrifice stability to save a friend. Either way, she feared the aliens had already won. Emily grappled with her competing desires to help her friend, but also protect her own fragile recovery. In the end, she decided she had to know the truth, even if it meant battling personal demons again. Emily carefully brought up Megan's nightmares in their next therapy session. She floated vague hypotheses about repressed memories and trauma, watching the doctor closely for a reaction. But Dr. Miller's face revealed nothing. She gently redirected the conversation, advising Emily not to fixate on other patients' issues. Frustrated but not deterred, Emily realized she would need to take matters into her own hands. That night, after lights out, she quietly snuck out of her room and made her way to the records room. Heart pounding, she rifled through folders until she found Megan's file. Emily quickly scanned the pages, searching for clues. Phrases jumped out: delusions about alien abduction, obsessive markings on skin, belief in experimentation. It was all there, too similar to dismiss. Emily's hands shook, records scattering around her. Footsteps suddenly sounded down the hall, approaching the room. Emily dove under a desk, peeking out through the slit in the door. A nurse entered, glanced around curiously, then exited. Breathing a sigh of relief, Emily slipped back to her room undetected. She had found the proof she needed. Now she just had to convince Megan of the truth without losing her tenuous grip on reality. Emily crawled into bed exhausted, but her mind continued churning with dangerous possibilities as she drifted to sleep. Over the next week, Emily subtly worked to gain Megan's trust. She steered their conversations toward childhood and memories, coaxing out details. Emily also snuck into the records room whenever she could, piecing together more of Megan's troubled history. She learned they had both grown up in the area at the same time, Megan just a grade below her in school. Emily also discovered Megan had been briefly hospitalized after a psychotic break, not long before Emily's own. The similarities were too aligned to dismiss. One night as they lay talking in the dark, Emily decided it was time. "Megan, what do the aliens in your nightmares look like?" she whispered. Megan tensed but described the large oblong heads, dark oval eyes, spindly fingers. It matched Emily's visions exactly. Heart pounding, Emily shared her own experiences, carefully watching Megan's reaction. Megan seemed equally shocked by the parallels. Her eyes took on a distant, haunted look. "Do you think BT was real?" Megan finally asked in a small voice. "That we both went through something out there?" Emily hesitated, fearful of encouraging delusions. but she couldn't ignore the growing conviction that some inexplicable truth bound them. Taking Megan's hand, she responded, "I think we owe it to ourselves to find out." Megan met her eyes and slowly nodded. They both understood the risk, but if answers existed, they had to pursue them, even if it meant crossing the line from sanity into the unknown. Emily and Megan made a pact to work together to uncover the truth of their shared nightmares. They snuck into record rooms and questioned other patients, following up on any leads related to strange dreams or markings. After months of obsessive searching, they finally uncovered medical files that referenced an experimental sleep study at a nearby university over a decade ago. The study involved inducing night terrors in child subjects. Emily and Megan had both been participants. Armed with this knowledge, they confronted Dr. Miller, demanding answers. The doctor reluctantly admitted to being involved in the unethical experiments. She explained how they amplified childhood fears of the dark and unknown into vivid alien hallucinations, leaving lasting psychological trauma. Emily and Megan reeled from the revelation. Their nightmares had been artificially induced, nothing more than a callous scientific study. As children, their imaginations had transformed faceless researchers in hazmat suits into terrifying alien figures. But just as Emily and Megan prepared to inform the authorities, Dr. Miller made one final chilling confession. While most children had simply been released after the study, a special few had shown an unusual receptiveness to the induced night terrors. They were kept and monitored into adolescence and adulthood, carefully observed by the research team even now. Megan met Emily's eyes in horror as the truth sank in. They had never awoken from the nightmare, and the aliens had never let them go. Emily and Megan sat paralyzed as the implications of Dr. Miller's words sank in. They had been part of a twisted longitudinal study, intentionally tormented by nightmares their whole lives. The hospital was not a haven, but merely an observation tank. Dr. Miller regarded them coldly while summoning orderlies to restrain them. As Emily was dragged screaming down the hall to an isolated room, she caught a glimpse of the doctor's face flickering. For just a moment, the wrinkled human features melted away to reveal an insectoid creature with soulless black eyes. Its mouth curled into an unnatural grin, savoring her terror. Alone in the padded room, Emily felt reality crumbling. She clawed the walls wildly, shrieking for help, but she knew none would come. There was no one left to trust. Everyone here was an alien in disguise, watching her, toying with her. Emily sank to the floor, hugging her knees as sobs racked her body. She thought of Megan trapped and terrified in a nearby room. Were unspeakable experiments being done to her right now? Would the aliens come for Emily next to continue their research? Rocking back and forth, Emily prayed for an escape, even if it was only in death. She wished she had jumped from that cliff when she'd had the chance. As she dissolved into anguished tears, Emily felt her grip on sanity stretching paper thin. This was no delusion. The nightmare consuming her life was sickeningly real, and she realized now it always had been. There would be no awakening. This serves as a warning that we all have darkness dwelling deep in our subconscious that can overwhelm us if brought to the surface. Once our own minds turn against us, conjuring nightmares from suppressed fears and trauma, we may lose the ability to awake from them. This offers a profoundly chilling lesson about the fine line between sanity and madness, and cautioning against unleashing the sinister forces lying dormant in the unexplored depths of the psyche. Beware the terrors that lurk within, for once awakened, they may never sleep again. When darkness falls, the sinister visitors emerge to plague the vulnerable mind. Sanity is but a fragile shield against the persistent shadows. No lock or key or secret place can keep them out, for they come from within. Surrender not your psyche to their twisted experiments, lest you find yourself forever trapped in the endless nightmare. Please like, share, and subscribe for more creepy tales from the netherworld. Thanks for your support. Until next time, sweet dreams.